In the first of two video lectures for this week, we'll be talking about employee and employer rights. So my big disclaimer is that I have a program director permit. I have worked as a director and I've worked as a site supervisor in multiple kind of capacities, state funded and the military primarily, but I also worked in a smaller kind of infant toddler program as well. So I do have some background in this, and I do have some knowledge about employee and employer rights. When it comes to this particular field, most of my knowledge is when I know that I'm in over my head and when I know that I know a couple of things. So if you are at all in doubt about a particular situation at your school or how to handle something, this is the area where you shouldn't just guess or take your best guess or think that you're doing the moral or ethical thing. You might not be doing it, or you might be, but it's not the law. So the following information really is intended to give general information about laws and issues in order to enable you to decide when you might need to seek legal counsel or when you might need to seek business counsel, things like that. So for you that are out there that are maybe small business owners, FCC providers, or kind of going at it alone, this kind of stuff is intended to help you with that type of information. So legal questions and requests for specific information about employee rights or liability issues should be directed to a lawyer, the specific state governing agency that I'm talking about, or if possible, a human resources or HR employee or consultant as well. If you are not a small business owner, FCC provider, you're not kind of on your own per se, it's still important for you to know this because you can still do something wrong and your entire organization will be on the hook for your mistake. So when in doubt, call HR. When in doubt, call the person above you. So just because you have people above you, you have management, you're in Head Start, you're in a state-funded program, if you make a mistake with employee or employer rights, you and your organization will be on the hook, and that is a bad situation. When in doubt, call somebody. So that is just my disclaimer. We're going to jump in, but once again, any questions, you know you're out of your depth, go with that gut instinct and go for some help. So some of the things we'll be talking about is kind of what are the legal rights that are afforded to all employees in California specifically. So if you are not currently living in California, you've moved during the semester, or you're in Arizona or Hawaii, sometimes that happens. I am very specifically talking about California state. I am not talking about anywhere else in the United States. I only know California because I've only worked here. We're also going to be talking about employee and employers' rights as well. So why is this important? You're probably like, oh my God, this is so boring. I really just want to do curriculum and play with kids and, you know, talk with teachers all day. Because employee rights are really, really important. Like I said, if you do something wrong, your whole organization could be on the hook. You could have legal fees as a business owner. There's lots of different things. Also, it's really important for teams and team building. Not knowing your expectations, not knowing what your roles and responsibilities are can set you up for feeling really insecure about your job position. So obviously that's going to happen with staff as well. And we've all had kind of misunderstandings or people thinking, oh, you like this teacher better than me, or you're paying her more than me. Why are you paying her more than me? She gets a better shift than me. I don't want to do this kind of shift. This is going to help you in this particular area. So making sure that everything you do is as fair and consistent as possible for all of your staff members will ultimately trickle down. And if you have salary matrices and you have really clear expectations and policies and things like that, that will hopefully kind of take away some of the rumor mill and the innuendo and you like her better than me, because you've really set up a program that is as consistent and fair for everyone. Also, it limits your legal exposure. Once again, there are some legal issues that I will bring up in this class. If you've done something wrong with it, you face legal exposure. And you really don't want to have to do that. You don't want to be sued because somebody was in a protected class and you dismissed them unfairly. That would be something that nobody kind of wants to be in those types of situations. We have a lot of state regulations. We've talked a lot about licensing, but there are other governmental state organizations and federal organizations that look at workplaces. We are a workplace. We employ people. We give them their salary in order for coming to class, doing their classroom expectations. That is a big part of what we do as a business relationship. So by ensuring fair and consistent treatment and also complying with that, you are really going to be setting your program up for success, I believe. So California and federal requirements are really complex. They're quite often conflicting and they can be really hard to understand. And I've been doing this for a while, and I sought out help from my mother, who just retired after 30 years working for a state organization or state agency and county agency, and she finds it complex and difficult to understand as well. So that's why consultants and people who literally went to school for this and have spent their entire time working on this are going to be really helpful. And consultants can also be people within these own organizations. Like if you reach out to help desks and things like that, those people primarily have been trained in those basic entry-level questions that you have about their specific labor board or something like that. So you can always start out there and see if your answers can be answered that way as well. What is the worst case scenario? So if you do something wrong as far as employee rights, you can be fined, you can be cited as well, or you could be shut down, and ultimately there could be prison time for non-compliance. Very rare, and very rare within our industry as well. We are primarily people who are wanting to do right by their employees. Typically prison times and shutdowns and fines are for people who don't want to do right by their employees. They're stealing from their employees, things like that. We're typically not in that kind of class. We are trying to do right by the people we work with. We're typically in a caring position, but there are these ramifications if you don't know what you're doing, or you do it wrong intentionally. So page 393 to 395, only 2 pages, but in the textbook they have a little bit of organization with this. Also, I have what's called the English Worker PDF, and this is on Canvas. And this is your kind of entryway into the world of employee rights. So what rights do your employees have? A lot of them you probably know. How long can you work without a break? How long can you work without a lunch? That type of stuff. You probably know that already, but I love this PDF. It's a little bit long, but it's a very big font. It's designed to help you at the bare minimum give your employees the rights that are due to them. So that is a great resource. You probably want to print it out. I don't often say that. It's totally up to you, but that is a great resource, and it will be used this week in the kind of quiz that we're doing. The following pages, though, are an introduction to federal acts, to websites, and just helping you understand your duty as an employer. I am speaking to you as a future employer or somebody who is an employer, a director, supervisor, management in this case. I know many of you are still in a teaching capacity, so stretch out a little bit. Think if I was a business owner, if I was the director, if I was the program director, these are the things that I would need to know. Also, as a current employee, are you having your rights done to you as well? So that might be something you want to think about in whatever position you are. Even as a site supervisor, there are typically people above you. Are your rights as an employee, although you are salaried most likely, are your employee rights as well being honored? It's kind of a two-way street. Most of us are employers and employees. So this kind of lecture and this week's work is designed to support yourself as an employee and to support the people who work underneath you as an employee. So we do have a lot of federal protections. I think that's one of the wonderful things about the United States is that since the 60s and before that through union organizing, we've always kind of had these protections for employees, and it's things that we're always working on. We want to make sure the people that are working for us are getting the protections that they need. So it started off with the Equal Pay Act, so equal pay for performing similar work. This was very gendered at that point. We also have the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of protected classes, and this is a very important one. Sex, so we kind of meant gender in that case, race, color, religion, and national origin, so where you were born. And then we have the Rehabilitation Act of '73, which also prohibits job description because of disabilities as well. So those are the areas that you want to make sure that you are not setting yourself up for in discrimination when it comes to job interviews, to hiring, and to firing as well. Specifically hiring, making sure that if you can accommodate somebody, you can. And then also that you are not discriminated on the basis of these protected classes. That's why when we talk about hiring and firing, we'll talk about all the questions you should ask and not asking questions that somebody would take as perhaps discriminatory. So here is some information about FMLA. So FMLA is also part of the Department of Labor, which I put down their little mascot down here. They're really the ones that give us a lot of our rights. A lot of the federal protections come from the Department of Labor. They're also ones that give us the FMLA as well, and that is typically a question that I get asked a lot is FMLA, when do I have to give it? How many employees do I have in order to get it? So it is a really important act. Many of us, I know myself, have taken it in order to take my maternity leave, and my husband also took paternity leave. So typically it's about 3 months after the birth of a child, adopting a child, or if a family member is sick and you need to take care of them. So it's started in the 1990s. There has been a push nationwide to have more protections after pregnancy and more paid leave. But right now we have FMLA on the federal level, and then we also have some state programs within California that can give you some paid leave after having a baby as well. So it's good to know both of those programs that might come into play depending on the program you have. So like I said, there's FMLA, federal, and then there's the CFRA, which is that state one. So the California Family Rights Act allowed me to take a longer maternity leave with my daughter because it was paid family leave because of the employer that I was working at the time. But if you don't have the ability to take it paid, you do have 6 weeks of protected unpaid leave from your job in order to care for yourself, family members, or children who are unable to take care of themselves. So that is fantastic as well. And then we have FMLA. So if you're an employer with more than 50 people, you're giving FMLA, which is about 3 months or 12 weeks. So those are just those issues. I know that often comes up. That's often the kind of leave that we are approving for people. So I like to put this into just so that you understand about it. So that you as an employee know if you weren't aware, or you can help guide your employees if they had questions. So if you need paid family leave, so it's that California paid family leave, which is that kind of 6 weeks, you can submit a claim for PFL insurance benefits for the following reasons: a seriously ill children, parent, parent-in-law, grandparent, spouse, domestic partner, typically somebody an immediate relation to you or somebody you have married. The bond with the new employee's new minor child, or to bond with the minor child with adoption as well. So there are reasons, and you do this through Employment Development Department. So this is what it goes through for your paid family leave. In the state of California, they're also the ones that handle unemployment as well. So EDD is typically the acronym that we give, and that is the department that handles all of this type of stuff. So sending your employees there so that they can figure out their leave for them, and then you as a state supervisor or program director, knowing how long they are planning to be out, and then how long they are granted by our paid family. So I also want to talk about minimum wage. So minimum wage is changing, and it will be changing, and it can vary by area and city as well. When I worked in San Diego County, but my employer was in San Diego City, my minimum wage that I received for driving as part of my job was higher than it would have been if I hadn't been within the city of San Diego employment. Kind of a weird thing. I wasn't fighting it. It got me more money when I drove because I was paid for driving as part of a job, but only minimum wage, and then I got more money for the work that I actually did for the child per hour. So I have a great thing from the LA Times. It's a visual on graphics about how it's going to change, steps that it's going to take, and then depending on how many employees or employers you have as well. Hearing from people who are small business owners, run small programs, this has been somewhat of a challenge, and it looks to be a challenge as we are starting to give people more money starting off in this field. So typically we were on a tier basis or a matrix basis. So you started off with as just an entry level with maybe very few units, not a formal degree, and not a lot of work. And then you would either go down the matrix with a lot of work, or you would go down the matrix with a lot of education and make money kind of on a two-tier basis, either through work or through education. If you did both, then you would be kind of down at the bottom making much more an hour. But this is going to change those salaries and change those matrices, in that the person who doesn't have the education and doesn't have the experience is still coming in kind of at a higher wage. So it's making our whole wage matrices and what we offer staff who have been with us longer, who have a lot more education or a lot more experience, more money because of that. I don't have any particular thoughts. I don't have a pony in this race when it comes to it. Just that the minimum wage is changing what we are paying staff across the board. I would love to hear more from you guys about maybe some of the challenges you're seeing, maybe how it's affecting things positively and negatively. So we also have requirements for employers. So employers with, and I'm just going to read this straight out, and this is from EDD, the Employment Development Department. Once again, employers with 10 or more employees are now required to electronically submit employment tax returns, wage reports, and payroll tax deposits to the EDD beginning January 1st, 2018, and then all remaining employees will be subject to this mandate. So back in the day, I worked with a very small Montessori that had about 4 to 5 kind of part or full-time employees, a director, and then kind of a part-time admin office assistant. I think she was a consultant. She might have been paid under the table. She worked just very short amount of hours kind of doing bookkeeping. And we all literally punched in with like a punch-in thing, like the old school machines that you would do that in. Most people have since gone very electronic, but there are probably programs out there that in 2018 were kind of hit by this, and now the state just literally had to legislate it and be like, we're now going electronic, no more of the old school like plugging in and out type things. I mean, you can still do that, but your tax returns, your wage reports, and your payroll tax has to be electronic. So you can literally, and that's probably a misnomer. So you can still do the old school signing in and signing out, but then my employer would write on it, and then she would calculate it, and she would write it out, and she'd get her calculator, and she'd do taxes, and then she would write me like a check from her business account. So and then she would handwrite tax returns and handwrite my pay stacks and what she expected from state taxes, which was very typical in the 90s and early 2000s. So anybody who is still doing that now needs to go on to the electronic tax returns, wage reports, and payroll tax, because that's just how EDD is doing it. But in order to support that, they have an e-file and an e-pay mandate, and they have some support for maybe some of our older programs that are still a little bit handwriting or not electronic. They're trying to support people with that as well. EDD, so the Employment Development Department for California State, supports taxes, payroll, claims, disability, fraud, workman's comp fraud, that type of stuff. So they are a great department. As an employer or small business owner, they are kind of your best friend. They help with all of the stuff. You submit a lot of things to them, but they are also a great resource on their website as well, as far as things that they can do to support you. So we also have federal wage law. So California has changed our minimum law. We're kind of on the forefront of that. We're also a very higher cost of living when it comes to other places, when we're compared to other places in the United States. So federal wage laws started in the 30s, amended in the 70s for minimum wage, equal pay, record keeping requirements, things like that. We have less to do with that because California is a bit more progressive. So if we're meeting our California state minimum wage laws, we're also meeting the federal minimum wage laws at this point. They do have some other laws about wage garnishment. When can it be garnished? When can it not? And they're also, the federal government is the one that started Social Security, so that you have to have an employer contribution in addition to employee deductions for retirement and disability. So we all kind of pay into Social Security in the hopes that one day, probably for many of us, when we're in our maybe 70s at this point, we will have some Social Security when we wish to retire. There's also the federal income tax withholding law, which collects employees' income tax and deposits it into kind of a federal bank or dispensary, and it's criminal if you are an employer not to comply with this. Most bookkeeping systems that we use do the Social Security and the federal income tax for you, or if you have a bookkeeper who's doing it for you, or even if you have kind of ebooks resource on your website, they are helping you to be able to do this because this is federal, it's standard, this is the law, this is what that's why we have bookkeepers, is to help us with these types of things, and that's why we have bookkeeping equipment and pay equipment and time equipment and things like that, is in order to keep track of this and to make sure that we're doing it right and we're withholding what we're supposed to. So this isn't so much a huge concern. It would be more a concern if you were willfully withholding it in order to like profit yourself. Then that would be a really big deal. But for the most part, people are complying with this because it's just part of our system. So when it comes to paid and accrued time off, there is no legal requirement in California that an employer provide its employees with either paid or unpaid vacation time unless it is offered in your employee contract or employee handbook. So if you are not going to be offering vacation time, do not put it in a contract or your employee handbook. If you do put it in there, it's somewhat binding and you're going to have to fix it in some way, and you're probably going to have to pay it out within that year or whatever it is. You would definitely have to speak to somebody. So you do not have to offer vacation time. Most places do. It's a nice thing to do. It's fairly standard within our working system that people have some kind of accrued time or paid time off. Maybe it's not designated as a vacation. Most places now have gone to just paid time off or PTL. You accrue it throughout the year, and then if you have been there for a couple of years or something, you get more per year as well. Right now, the only law on the California books is employers must offer employees at least 3 days or 24 hours of paid sick leave per year and per employee at minimum wage of per hour. These statewide laws apply to all cities and all counties within the state of California. However, some cities within California have chosen to add the statewide laws with their own more expansive minimum wage or paid sick leave ordinances. So this is where you want to check where you live and what could happen. Like I said, in San Diego City, I got more paid per hour because of the rate that I was and the county organization, and there were other things that were involved in it. So I got more minimum wage than I would have somewhere else in our own county. So you need to know what your city is saying, what your county is saying, and then what the state is saying as well. But the general is 3 days or 24 hours of paid sick leave. That is your minimum. You have to provide that. You should probably pay more. You're going to keep your employees, and we worry with retention and staff turnover and things like that. More vacation time and more time when your kids are sick, things like that will add to the amount that your staff wants to stay with you. So if you are able to pay it, it's probably good for your bottom line because you're not having to constantly hire and fire as well. So posting, so you walk into any staff lounge in this county, in this state, there's 50 billion white laminated posters all over the place. It's not, every employer's dream for decorating their staff lounge, but that is the common employee area, and that's because we legally have to put state and federal posters out there. We have to have minimum wage, we have to have the EEO, or equal employment opportunity, so that's some regulations that if we felt we were being discriminated against, that's who we would file a claim with. We also have to have age discrimination laws, fire and evacuation plans, and that should be in all of our classrooms as well, in our offices, any space within our center. Safety protections, health protections, and then OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They are the ones that are more concerned with like our bleach solutions, pesticides, anything that has to do with our employees' safety and health in their workplace. So things that they have to prepare, how do they have to clean, that's primarily their jurisdiction, and they have their own posters. If you need the posters or you want to know exactly what you need to do, go to www.dir.ca.gov, or you can just click on this link and it will take you straight there to learn more about the posters that you need to have in your staff lounge. All right, so an employer rights. As a supervisor, you have more legal standing if you have written, and I mean written, you have had your employees look at it, you have enforced it, and you have had them sign it, policies on file for all employees. So you need to create contracts for employment with your employees stating your expectations. What do you want them to do? What are the basic minimum requirements that all teachers need to do? And it needs to be signed by them and dated as well. And then it needs to be enforced. And this can be a very legal issue and a little bit of a sticky situation that you just haven't said you're going to do this. You've gone around and you've made sure fairly and consistently that all staff have had to do it. Once again, that fair and consistent. You're not letting one person do or not do something that the other person has to or does not have to do. It's very fair and consistent as much as possible for all of your staff members. So we want to also want to look at creating a contract, and we'll do this later on as well, for families that stipulate how and when care is performed, because this is a business transaction as well, and what you're going to be reimbursed for that service. So just keep in mind contracts are families and for our employees as well. So you have a lot of responsibilities to your employees, and I take that very, very seriously. We are the ones who are giving them money for the service they're providing us. They typically show up 40 hours a week. They give it all. They're in the classroom. They love their children. So we need to protect them. We need to make sure that they are safe and they are healthy in their workplace. We are creating a workplace, not just an educational system for children. There is that duality of our job. We need to keep our employees healthy, safe, and hopefully happy. And we need to keep our children healthy, safe, and hopefully educated and happy as well. So you might be long gone on this journey. Like, you know 50 times more than me. You've been running a small business for a while. That's fantastic. I'd love to hear more about your perspectives on minimum wage or keeping employees safe or OSHA standards or anything like that. Some of you are maybe are teachers and you have not even thought about the fact that you're an employee or an employer, or what are those rights? What are those laws? You know, you've never used maternity leave. So all of this might seem really, really new to you. This is just a primer. If you're new to the game, these are the things that you need to be thinking about as you take your journey professionally. And for you that are maybe farther along on that professional journey, just to recommit to the ideas of why we do this, to protect the people who work for us. All right, this is one of 2 videos. I'll see you in the next one.